Welcome back, everyone. I am continuing the discussion with Arnie Tracy as we were just discussing actually Palantir's 2024 as we see it, the story developing, and where we just left things in that prior video. Arnie was talking about how the story is going to continue to develop for Palantir and how important it is for retail investors to stay on top of the understanding of the stock and what we know about how the product continues to evolve. The story continues to change over time. We saw that in 2023 with AIP getting introduced. And in this video, I want to discuss with Arnie what comes after AIP, or more specifically, what comes after where we are currently? Where are things going product-wise? What's not priced in? Leadership-wise, are they incentivized to stay? And cash-wise? We know buybacks are on the table. What about dividends, reinvesting, acquiring? So I'll kick things off here and just talk about my thoughts on each of these three. So product-wise, I think this is a super interesting question from the standpoint of we've seen how much AIP has contributed to Palantir's increase in valuation and how well they were able to harness internal talent and engineering resources into how do we actually operationalize these LLMs? And I don't think Palantir would be $25 today without that. I think it would most likely be $15. And so, of course, that's a great immediate boost to the valuation because they've been able to serve that need. More significantly, it's something that I definitely missed. And I know we're going to talk in a bit about the whole $1 trillion target. And so when I'm evaluating Palantir on a $1 trillion basis, I don't want to get into it just yet, but from the standpoint of looking at Gotham and Foundry, I really don't think it's that easy to get to a $1 trillion valuation. But what I had overlooked is what's next for Palantir. And I think they're in right place, right time, right talent, right management to release AIP, which arguably is an even larger opportunity than their initial business on the commercial side of things. And so I think it's super important. And something that I've realized is you can't always just evaluate the company on what they currently have. And I know that's obvious, and I know a lot of people think that, but it's a really difficult topic, I would think, is like, how do we evaluate what comes next for Palantir and how do we not overpay for that either? So I'd love to hear a common topic, a consumer product. How would we make AIP for consumer? Or more broadly, how could Palantir develop another commercial product? Because I would say government is always going to be a very strong backbone for the company, but I think the growth, it's never going to be a growth driver like it was previously. And I think it's going to continue to lay a solid foundation for the fundamentals and the financials, but I don't think it's going to give us much of that growth going forward. So I would love to know, how do you think about product-wise where the company is headed and what are investors expecting?
Palantir has this feature that I personally love. Tesla is focused as the company that builds the machine that builds the machine. And I think Palantir can be seen with a similar lens as a software company that builds software to build software. Software that can be deployed in any vertical and potentially almost any use case. What seemed to be like a dream, a vision, I think we are gradually seeing this becoming reality. And the boot camps actually accelerate this process. What we need to think is Palantir essentially builds itself on top of the previous layer. So Gotham was built as like, okay, we get the intuition from PayPal, let's develop it as a Gotham, but for a different context. Then to manage Gotham effectively, they needed to build a foundry to develop new features. And then to organize Apollo, to organize the updates in all the environments, they needed to develop Apollo. Okay, perfect, great. How do we actually leverage all we have with these new tools of AI? Then they started playing around with AI on themselves, but probably they realized, okay, I want to have like a sort of control on this weird monster that can be very powerful, but at the same time could be really damaging if I am not able to control. So they created AIP platform as a way to contain the beast in the cage and to extract the best of it. So what comes next? I think what is currently missing from the state of art as it is. And I think what we saw in the latest AIP conference is truly the direction of the company. So Shyam, a few months ago, shared the idea of seeing Palantir as this control panel to control K LLMs, which I think is a very powerful direction to go to. But we have a further intuition from the latest aipcon. I think all the eyes were on VR headset, Panasonic, like that was crazy. And I think that is a good hint into the direction product-wise, a very strong interaction between what is software and the reality. So hardware that is actionable thanks to software. And we have seen that also with Titan. Titan is the first vehicle by the DoD, which is software defined. I think what we will see going forward on very broadly speaking of product wise is Palantir getting closer and closer to the real world, not becoming a manufacturer, but becoming as the true enabler for legacy companies, legacy real world producers, so hardware, to become software defined. Because in the age of AI, unless you are software defined, you stay behind. Tesla is essentially a car maker that is software defined. That is why, differently from all the other car makers, they move very fast, not only the car, but also as a company. Amazon, all the other big techs are essentially companies operating in legacy sectors, but that are software defined. So this component of being software defined first is what makes companies succeed when you have a changing environment. So I believe Palantir will gradually push more and more toward this integration between hardware and software, not becoming a hardware provider, but as the tissue that helps get the best from hardware. And we got the intuition from VR headset, but if we think of it also with SkyKit, that is essentially leveraging the full power of a computer. If you have a good software that helps you use the satellites to target enemies, that computer becomes more valuable. You have a drone that becomes way more valuable if that drone integrates with everything and the battlefield in the control panel of a computer. So I think there is a lot of space, especially in the manufacturing, in the control on this side. And one other side, which is completely software, I think we got the biggest intuition when at the end of aipcon, when the the nice guy shared that demo of okay, you have this intuition for a use case. Okay, let's make a picture, and you have the LLM understanding the archetype of that use case. And oh, guess what? There are some use cases that have already been developed with bootcamps. Actually, clients provided us the R&D to make these use cases. And essentially, if you can leverage that, you create really like a knowledge block of all the potential use cases in the corporate world, in the government world, war, or not war. But essentially, it's like you created the ontology of all the ontological world of corporate and government. And once you have like full understanding of all potential use cases, then you can serve potentially everyone. And then you can also create more powerful solutions because you have all this compounded knowledge that keeps compounding. So I believe the direction here on the pure software side is Palantir going completely brutal in optimizing and softwareizing itself. Because the idea, I think, that stays behind Palantir is they don't want to become a Snowflake with 4,000 salespeople. They want to have like 4,000 people in total, but 4,000 people, 5,000 people who are very, very niche, special, that are really able to create this software that builds software at the best. So I think the further intuition is what makes Palantir so software company that is unbeatable. So Palantir has been criticized for being a consultancy company, and in the early days, it was more similar to a consultancy. But what lazy people don't understand is that consultancy component is what helps Palantir build the software that builds the software. And this process is like inevitable. So while Snowflake keeps hiring salespeople, Palantir is building software to optimize everything. Over time, these differences really compound. I'm taking on Snowflake because that is the archetype of the company that grows because it hires, not because it is pure tech that scales. Paradoxically, Palantir is already showing that it is way more software company than Snowflake.
Sounds like you're calling out my my good friend the Bear Cave, which you know, it seems like his call was not accurate. Middle of 2023, saying Palantir was, you know, a fake AI company, which of course I took issue with. But I think that the reasoning behind his claim isn't totally unfounded, which is as you're saying, is like Palantir's work, you know, in the early days was much more a lot of, you know, hands-on with the customer. We're gonna send our engineers out and actually, you know, work through it. And so I could see how you might, you know, fall into that bucket of thinking, but that's been thrown out the window. And so his research, I think, came before or around AIP introduction, which totally made that irrelevant. It's funny, I just did an edit on Jim Cramer where he calls out betting on Snowflake instead of Palantir and how great Snowflake's growth was, and you're saying how much more inorganic that really was, which I think it just goes to show the Palantir story is really one that takes time to play out, but is going to really reward investors the right way. And back to your points on the product wise innovation going forward, I really like Palantir's approach about being LLM agnostic, you know, AR, VR, mixed reality agnostic to all of the hardware producers. And I think that's going to put them in an incredible position, right? Because if I'm thinking from a commercial perspective, I might choose Apple for some reasons. I know in the workplace, you're really going with Microsoft a lot more. Maybe Meta's headset takes off in an enterprise context. And to be able to work with that, work across the different platforms, I think is really something important. It's gonna really benefit Palantir a lot. So I loved what you were saying there. I want to continue forward to I think leadership. So like leadership going forward, I don't know if anyone else was concerned about this, but you know, when your stock's down significantly, I'm a bit concerned about Alex Karp had mentioned on the conference calls, like inbound interest towards selling the company. And so he mentioned that never really took it too seriously. He was just saying like there is interest in selling the company. And of course, the founders have to agree on that. I guess towards the end of 2022, in the beginning of 2023, like should we be concerned about leadership, you know, leaving it all, or, you know, they've really been there since the beginning. Of course, Karp and Sankar has been there since 2006. And really it's led by those two individuals that have done so much for the company. And I can't imagine losing either or both of them. But I think going forward, the success that we've seen, and I think Palantir really hit an inflection point last few quarters going forward, that I am no longer concerned at all about losing leadership. I think they have this new fire inside of them to see this through. And I think Palantir is both of their lives work, and I think they love it, everything about it, at least from my understanding of how they talk about the company. And so I think leadership wise, I think we absolutely have the right people for the job, and I think they're in the right headspace. They're incentivized to stay. I personally, I've never been more confident in the management that we have.
Initially, I was skeptical before I trust the management. I really seek for reasons not to trust rather than to trust. But I really saw an evolution. So if after 4 years, karp would have been the same karp that we saw in the first earnings calls, if if we would see shyam as the first shyam that we saw, I would personally be concerned because they are exceptionally leaders, but not the right leaders to really create a beam of. Now, I would say, what stop them? Like okay, I'm clearly biased. I love the company, I love the management, but I struggle to see a better team to really deal with the opportunity they're facing. They have the right culture, the right leadership, the right products, and they only need to execute, which we have further evidence, like week after week, that they are able, they deliver. Like Titan, I think it is not as important for the monetary value, but the signal that they provided. Like Palantir becoming like the first defense contractor that was born in the last 20 years, and the first software prime. Like Palantir is creating history. To create history, you really need to have like a tier one management. So I was initially skeptical. Like I think more like I loved the leadership because okay, I like these weird CEOs, so I was intrigued. But I was really skeptical. It's like I have intuition they really rock. I can't really rationalize how they rock. Now I see them really rocking and playing very musical, like a very beautiful songs with
Yeah.
their tools.
No, it's amazing. And in my brief interaction with Sham, just trying to get a sense of like, is he genuine? Totally is. Haven't had an interaction with Alex Karp, but I mean, I think they're really, as you see them on video, and they really care about what they're doing, and it's, so much of the story is left to be told. And a funny thing with Sham changing his title to CTO, I was like, what's up with that? We don't have a COO
What's
now.
the
Like what?
problem?
Like, yeah, what's the problem? Are you about to head out? But no, I mean, I think that's just him declaring is like, I'm going to be here a whole lot longer. Like you wouldn't change your title if you were about to leave. And so I know no one's worried about him or anyone else leaving. It's just, a risk that you have to, think about as an investor. And to me, that was a signal once I thought about it a bit more that like he's very passionate about that technology. You see his presentations, and he cares so much about this and getting it right and leveraging, everything that they've built since the beginning. Like they now have all of the resources they've dreamed of. And now is the time to execute. The talent's pouring in the door, 3 billion in cash. Like now is the time to make it happen. And I think they just love every minute of it. So now I want to just quickly hit on cash wise, what comes next. And so we know buybacks are on the table. It's just a matter when, not if, it's actually happening. What would you say about dividends, reinvesting in the business? I think is guaranteed. Obviously, they're doing that. But I would say between dividends and acquiring any companies, I would think they're trying to develop technologies internally. But what would you say quickly on a timeline between dividends? Is that pretty far out? And are there any targets you think Palantir is going to pick up with respect to acquiring, or do you think they're fairly opposed to that?
Let's start from the premise. Could they distribute cash as dividend? Now, potentially, they could do that. Would it make any sense? Objectively speaking, not. Unless they really wanted just to say, okay, let's start dividend of $1, just to say, and to start entering in the cluster of companies that pay a dividend. It doesn't really matter how
Right,
much,
right.
but at least you start making like first, and then you gradually increase every quarter. Is like from 1 cent to 2 cents. It's like, okay, hurrah. But that would be more a signal rather than a real need. I think this financial engineering side is not what they're really focused. If they were, they would have used the buyback to actually exploit the opportunity when Palantir was around 16, just as at the beginning of the year. That was in insight an opportunity they could have exploited, but it means that at this moment in time they're really focused on the product, making sure that they capture the opportunity. It is completely useless if they buy back, they pay a dividend if they fail to capture the opportunity. So I like these, okay, there are priorities, let's prioritize the priorities. In terms of acquiring new targets, I don't think they're really willing to do that. I think Palantir approach as a culture converges more to Apple, which tries to develop their own stuff. And if they acquire more for the people or for a very specific component of the technology that they think it could take much time to develop. I think now Palantir, since it's software, develop software, they can build potentially whatever they want relatively quicker. But in terms of people, that could potentially make sense. I don't think they're really willing to do that, and especially not in the big size. And I'm not seeing Palantir becoming a snowflake, which needed to acquire 4 or 5 companies in the last year. I consider that a signal of weakness, weak culture, weak ability to develop a new product. I would see very likely in, let's say, 5-10 years from now, so not priority, Palantir exploiting actually the knowledge they have to have not maybe a pure venture arm, but something like that could be really beneficial. Again, I don't consider that the priority, even if it could make sense now to at least start trying some small thing. In this moment in time, I'm happy they are laser focused to what really matters, because also the venture arm is completely useless if they fail to capture the opportunity. If they fail to capture the opportunity, this company is just another SaaS. But if they capture the opportunity, they would monopolize like the sector so much that what do you do with cash? It becomes an AIP problem, like when Apple had so much cash that they didn't know what to do. You're always in time to buy back your shares if you have $100 billion in cash, but you need to get that first.
When I mention dividends, I'm not saying near term. I'm just wondering, and I think you put it perfectly. I think buybacks way ahead of dividends in the timeline of Palantir, and I like what you're saying about developing internally. And Apple certainly has that problem. It's almost like they're opposed to acquiring companies, and I think they just sort of pick off little acquisitions when they want to just integrate it into their technologies. They're not out there, acquiring any big names, and I don't think that's Palantir's destiny either. So I think this was a really good discussion. I want to wrap it up from here, but please tell people where they can find you and where they can see the rest of our discussion.
I'm mainly active on X, Arnie Trezzi, and on Substack, palantirbullets.com, which started to share just my research, and then gradually I built a weekly recap to easily sum up as an investor what I would have loved to read very briefly, so that even if I missed the developments during the week, I have a sense of, okay, what really matters to me as an investor. I was more active on YouTube, but I'm going back very soon. So you can also find me on YouTube.